best bites forever.
Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Chef Alicia, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make these cute little fondant shells, and what I am working on is a mermaid cake. Let's rock it out. All of them are going to start off the same way, which is by grabbing a piece of fondant and softening it up. So it kind of works like clay. You know, you have to make sure that it's pliable, and the best way to do that is just to move it around in your hands until it gets kind of softened up. So once you get to that stage, the first shell that we're going to make is going to need a nice little worm made. So here you can see me forming my little worm, and again, a lot of these shells are kind of going to start off the same way, but I'm going to skip, the softening of the fondant. Do make sure that all of your other fondant is in plastic and sealed. So for this one, the worm is kind of tapered, so it's thick at one end and thin at the other. And then I just started in the middle and did like a curly Q, worked my way down, broke it off where I felt like it was long enough, and now I'm going to use this little fondant tool. It looks kind of like a teeny little knife on the end if you don't happen to have the tool, but I want to make sure that it looks like a little creature is living inside, so I kind of push it inside, to make the little hole. And then I'm also going around the outside and just pinching each of those little rings, and you can see that that's making like kind of like little pyramids around each of the rings, just so that it looks a little bit more realistic. This is going to look absolutely great when we add some color to it. It's looking really nice shape-wise. I'm just kind of cleaning up the little points right now, and once I get it looking how I want it to look, which I'm pretty happy with it, maybe trim that a little bit and, maybe again make the hole nice and deep, because to make it believable, it has to look like a little creature can get inside of there. So this is my first shell. Of course, it has to dry overnight, and I'm going to do another video and post it immediately, so the link will be down below of how to add the colors and how to paint these. So now I am ready to show you how to do another shell. So again, I said, a lot of these are going to start off kind of the same. So here I have a worm. This time my worm is kind of thicker, as you can see on one side, and then just like the other half of it is going to be thinned down. So once I get it to the point where I want it, and I'm just kind of, trying to get it nice and even. Pretty happy with this here. I'm going to roll it onto itself. So a little hint here, if as you're doing this, if the fondant isn't sticking to itself, what you can do is just kind of tap your finger into a little bit of water and just very, very, very lightly give it a tiny bit of water to help it stick to itself. And if it's too sticky, what I just now used is cornstarch. So the cornstarch is going to take away stickiness, and the water is going to add stickiness. Again, I'm using that little tool and just kind of forming the little hole inside. Moving right along, I'm ready to show you how to do another one. So for this one, again, long tapered worm. I flattened down the thicker side, and then I'm kind of starting at the thinner side, and you can see I just put water on there. That's what's in that little dish over to the side. So for this one, it's almost like putting a little ice cream cone kind of shape, with starting with the thinnest end and working down to that kind of thicker end, which I just pushed and made flat with my thumb. Again, you need the little hole so it looks like a little creature can get inside of there and live. So this guy is pretty happy. I'm going to go ahead and maybe make some little minor adjustments. Again, it has to dry overnight, so you want to put it into a safe place. Alright, moving right along, let's make another shell. So this one is going to be a little bit different. This one I am not starting off with a worm, but I am starting off with something more like a cone. So it's kind of like a traffic cone, or like, those incense that you can buy that are shaped like cones. Once you get that formed, you're just going to pinch and pull like a very thin little sheet of the fondant forward like so. This is going to fold over here in a second, and it's getting a little bit sticky because I've had it out and I've been touching it. So again, I'm just kind of using the cornstarch as I go. Once I get a little bit of kind of a flap, I guess you could call it, pulled out there, I want to make sure that it's kind of precise, and I also want to add the detail of like the little point down there at the end. I'm also going to pinch along the edges. Again, the more detail that you give stuff like this, the better that it's going to look when it's painted, and of course the more realistic it's going to look when you're all finished. So once I have finished going around that top part and doing the little pinches, I just want to kind of sharpen that that flap. So this is again where the little creature would be crawling in and living. So I'm going to take my little knife thing here and kind of push it in so that it looks like it goes into the shell and make a nice little crease there. And then I just want to kind of roll it over. I'm putting all of these over to the side, and you can see I also have starfish in there, which by the way I did in a separate video, so I'll leave a link to that down below also. By the way, I am working up to a little mermaid cake which looks like this, and I will make sure to leave that link also when I finally get that video up, which it'll be coming soon. I'm just doing it a little bit at a time because it's kind of a lot that goes into it with the shells and the starfish and all the little sea creatures. So once again, making a totally different shell. This time I did a tapered worm, so it's very thin on one end and kind of thicker on the other. And I'm going to use a toothpick and just kind of wrap it around the toothpick. This is going to give me like a perfect spiral shell. It's going to look really nice once it gets down to the bottom. And I'm just kind of, again, very carefully wrapping it. It was really thin on one end and it got thicker as it goes down the little worm shape. So you can see how that looks here on the shell. It's like a nice little like spiral. And again, if it's not sticking to itself, just give it the tiniest little dab of water. It doesn't take very much. For this, obviously, I am not using like any kind of fancy tool, but just the end of my beater to give it that kind of hole where the little creature will crawl into. And then I just kind of chopped it off. So all of these shells, I have a pile of shells actually sitting in front of me that I'm using as my little model shells, so I kind of know what different kinds of shells look like. Anyway, moving right along, here I have another kind of worm, and I have flattened out the long end, and again it's tapered, so it's really thin at this other end. I'm using my water and just getting it a tiny bit wet. I mean, like, I probably used a drop of water. And then I just want to kind of fold it onto itself in a spiral. Again, this one is kind of one of those ice cream cone looking shaped pyramid creatures. I don't know what lives in any of these. I wish that I did and I could be like, oh yeah, I'm making a whatever shrimp shell. I don't know, shrimp don't live in these, a little hermit crab guy or something. But anyway, there is that one, and on to the next shell. So again, for this one, I'm going to make kind of a cone shape. I'm doing another one of those. So for this one, we're not doing a worm. You see me go over to my cornstarch. That is because it's getting a little bit too sticky. Of course, my hands had just a little bit of extra water on them from the last one, so make sure you're using your water and your cornstarch. I did a similar thing as the other one that we did that was a cone shape. I pinched kind of the little flap off there, and now I'm going around the top and just giving little pinches, the extra little detail here. But for this one, I'm actually going to kind of go around a couple of times and give it a nice little sharpness to it. And then I want to give this a little bit more depth, roll it over. Again, oh, here's another good little hint for you, is that little flap that's kind of on the side, you want to make that nice and thin along its edges because it's going to look more realistic than if it's one thickness all the way across. So if you look closely at mine, they're really thin on the edges, and that just gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. So here I've moved on to kind of a clamshell. What I did is I rolled it into a ball and then I flattened it, and then I'm thinning the sides just a little bit. Again, I'm using my little tool. It's kind of like a knife. You could probably use a knife for any of these things. I'll leave a link to the fondant tools down below too, but you could probably get away with using just a kitchen knife. Just be really gentle with it because this knife is not actually sharp. So anyway, I'm just giving this a few little stripes here, and now I'm going to do a pinch at the bottom and fold it over. And then of course the clamshells kind of have a curve to them, so you have to find something that it can dry on top of so that it has that kind of roundy shape. And I ended up using my little ramekin here. I had that ball of tin foil, but it wasn't making me completely happy on its own, so as you can see, I ended up shoving a little piece of paper towel underneath it and then putting it on top of my little ramekin guy there, and he is off to dry. So on to another one. For this one, I have kind of a thicker worm on one side and a thinner worm on the other. Again, I just used a teeny little bit of water, maybe a drop or two, and I'm going down. I've kind of spiraled it on top of itself like a little ice cream cone, and then just pulled off a piece from the bottom, and then I'm going to give the little creature somewhere to crawl into, give our little hermit crab or whoever lives inside of there somewhere to crawl into his shell. So again, a little bit of cornstarch, it's getting a little bit sticky. I want to make sure that it's holding together properly, and this is looking pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and set it over to the side to dry. And this one is kind of an experiment, but what I decided to do is make like a tall pyramid with aluminum foil, and then I'm going to roll out this super kind of long worm, but I want to flatten my worm out this time, and I think that I'm going to show you the shell in a second, but let's just go with this for now. So I'm going to start here at the kind of thinner end, and I want to wrap it around my aluminum foil mold and keep my fingers crossed of how this is going to turn out. And I'm just kind of very slowly but surely wrapping it around here. And I did end up having to use a little bit of extra water because there wasn't a whole lot of surface for it to kind of latch onto itself. So what I did is I dipped my fingers and then I kind of went around the whole outside of it. And I mean, honestly, it kind of looks like a croissant, but I mean, like a piece of croissant, but you know, we'll see once it's painted up how it comes out. So for this one, I just decided to do something a little bit different, and I colored a piece of fondant first. So I have like, I mixed a little bit of purple and just the smallest amount of like a copper brown together, and then I had a separate piece of white fondant, and obviously I've just kind of mushed them together and rolled them a couple of times to get them to marbleize. And then I rolled out my little worm, and now I'm just twisting it, which didn't make me happy at first, but I'm going to do it again here, and again, just kind of twisting and pulling on it, and you can see that this one actually turns into a really cool looking shell. But I wasn't sure because, you know, I wanted to paint these and kind of try to make them look as realistic as I could, so I wasn't sure that I wanted to do a lot of them this way, so I just kind of went ahead and ended up doing two. But I do think it came out really cool, and you could definitely go this route if you would like to color your fondant separately instead of painting it. But, you know, just keep in mind it may limit your options as far as coloring it once they're done. But this is how that one turned out, and I do think it is super cool. It definitely looks like a little shell, like something could totally be living in there. So again, overnight to dry before you even think about painting them. And I'm just going to show you this one last one because I had a teeny little bit of fondant left. But for this one, I am doing another clamshell, so I just made my little disc, I flattened it out. Now I'm going to do the stripes on here, and then I'm just going to pinch and fold that part under. Again, give it something that it can dry on. And this is it for my shells for my cake, and this is what they all look like on my cake once it was done. I was really happy with them, and thank you all so much for watching the video. Make sure that you subscribe and give a like and all of those things, and I love you all. I'll see you in the next video.
Backbiteforever.com